So under the base case, it was a negative. Base case, we had this negative, and all adverse changes make NPV worse. So the project is not viable under current assumption. Under any current assumption, we can say that the project is not viable. The project is not viable. Project is not viable because all of them. So we needed at least to have a positive. We needed to have at least a positive value, but because we don't have any positive, then the project is not viable under all the assumptions. Under the current assumption, the project is not viable. So that's how the question was supposed to be done. Yeah, so it had a lot of workings, especially for the sensitivity, analysis. Kindly consider subscribing if you are yet to subscribe to this particular channel. So thank you. So it's another day that we are continuing with the review of the BDF paper that was done in April 2025, just the last setting for April 2025. And so far we have reviewed two questions. We have reviewed question number 23 and we have reviewed question number 21. Question 23 for management accounting and 21 for financial accounting and reporting. So for today we are looking at question number 22. Question number 22 for financial management. This was a question on financial management. Question number 22. So we shall read through the question. And the question reads, Viongozi Enterprise is considering investing in a project with the following details. So I've been given the details: initial capital outlay, residual value, selling price per unit, and variable cost per unit, and you have the fixed cost per year. Additional, if implemented, the project has a potential sales value of 38,000 units per annum. 38,000 units per annum. The project has a useful life of 5 years. Viongozi Limited uses a weighted average cost of capital of 11%. For better perspective, the management will like to see the variability of the project return given a 7.5%. Given a 7.5% adverse change in the project details. 7.5% adverse change in the project details. For each scenario of input variability, the rest, so for each scenario of input variability, the rest of inputs are restored to the default input values. So you are required to compute the base case net present value. So the base case, so that's what we shall start with, the base case net present value, and it is for 5 years. Yeah, for a period of 5 years, and what we shall start with, so shall have our year. So year 0, year 1, and so on. Year 0, year 1, so I'll autofill this up to year 5, that way. So that is our period of the years. We shall have shillings in thousand. I will lock this. I'll autofill again, and I'll put bottom border to this. So what we have is our units. So the units, you can start with the units, and the units were 38, 38 is 38,000, but because they are shillings in thousand, just 38 as our units. 38 is a constant in that case. 38. Then the other thing that we have, we shall have our sales. Already know the selling price. Already have the selling price and the variable. All the rest of the values we know. So we shall have our sales. Our sales will be the units. multiplied by the selling price per unit, which we shall log. The selling price per unit is a constant. Selling price per unit is a constant. So for this one, I will delete this. This is year 0. It's supposed to start from year 1, and so remember, our values are already in 1000. So I can decide to use the whole value, so that by the end of the day, so let me eliminate this row, so that I use the whole values. So this is 38,000, which will autofill that way. So 0 decimal, yeah, that way, so that our cells, we shall take the units multiplied by the selling price, which I will lock the selling price that way, and I will autofill that way. So let's variable cost, and our variable cost, we shall take the units, we multiply by the variable cost per unit, which we shall lock that way. I will autofill. We get the contribution, our contribution, which will be the difference between the two. So that is our contribution. I'll use the top border for that. Then we shall have our fixed cost. And for the fixed cost, I will multiply this value by 1000, or I'll just rewrite it. No, here just put 1000. So this one will be this multiplied by this to get the whole value. Then this one. So assuming I lock this, I autofill this that way. So that is our values without having 1000. So here what I need to less is the fixed cost, and our fixed cost was this value, the fixed cost, which I will autofill. I will lock this value, our fixed cost that way. So remember, the values are outrageous, some of them were in billion, so we shall get that. Then after that, we shall get our cash flow, operating cash flow. We don't have tax. Operating cash flow, in this case, we shall take this minus this, and we shall autofill that top border. Then we have our the initial play, our initial play here, which is 50, and we shall have the residue value, which is 15 at the end. Remember, the residue, we are receiving it at the end. We are receiving it at the end. We have our net cash flow. Here. So we shall put auto sum from this point up to that point, and I'll autofill that. I'll have top and bottom border to close that. So that is our net cash flow. So for our NPV, we know our WACC is 11%. So WACC, and just write it here. WACC here is 11%. 11%. And the other thing we know is for sensitivity. Sensitivity rate. For sensitivity, for the purpose of sensitivity, it will vary by 7.5. It will vary with 7.5%. 7.5%. That way. So here we shall find our NPV. Remember, this is the base case. This is a base case NPV. So our NPV will be NPV. Here the rate is 11, comma the values. So these are our values here, and we minus the initial. Our initial is 50, and we shall get an NPV of negative 50 billion. 50 to 88, 50 million, million or billion, this is in billion. 50 billion as our NPV. So the assumption will be, as far as the question is concerned, so we are assuming that that is what the intention was, that these were in thousand. It was not put by error. Shillings in thousand, because if it is shillings in thousand, it means they were supposed to be billion. The correct way is supposed to be billion, so that now the base case, that one will be the base case, and this one, remember, they are not in thousand. So the 700 is just 700 and 75, unless it was 7,035. But as far as the values that we are using, they are just the way they have been done, or the way they have been presented. Then you'll find that the project was making a loss. It was having a negative NPV. The project was having a negative NPV of negative 50 billion 288, and so on. So that was for the first part. That was for the first part of the question, the first part of the question. Then the second part of the question is whereby you need to carry out NPV sensitivity analysis. This one, carry out NPV sensitivity of all the project input except the residual value and project life. Except the sensitivity and the project life. So the life and the residue, except the residual value and the project life. So the rest are supposed to change. The rest are supposed to change. The other values are supposed to change apart from the residue and the life. Apart from the residue and the life of the project. The residue and the life of the project. So remember, now the others we shall have to change, starting from the units. I'll just copy this. I'll copy this. Copy. And I'll paste it here. Copy, paste it, plus the formula. That way. And for this one, we shall start with the units. And in this case, our units, when they vary adversely, remember it was an adverse variation, adverse change. So our units, when they vary, they will vary. Currently we have 38,000. Our new units will be, these multiplied by, into bracket, 1 minus this one, 1 minus 7.5, 1 minus 7.5%. So we shall have that 5,150 as our new units. In this case, this one will be the new units, 35 That one will be the new units that will change. The new units that will change. And we'll find that the rest will remain. The rest will remain the selling price by the units, variable cost by the units. So those are remaining constant. Yeah, those are just but constant values. And because of locking, proper locking, we just copy and you'll find that your values will have captured the correct value. So for the sensitivity, so here does not copy to the right. So here we were having this, the initial outlay, the initial, and this one, the residue. So here the initial, remember we had 50 and the residue was not changing. These values are not changing. They're supposed to remain that way, and that will be our question of the second part of it. The first part of changing the variable, and we'll find that this will be our NPV. This will be our carry out the NPV sensitivity analysis. So percentage change, change in NPV. So percentage change in NPV, percentage change in NPV, percentage change in NPV. So percentage change in NPV, percentage change in NPV, so that you can know how sensitivity is when we change the units. If the units reduces to 35, how sensitive will be our NPV. So we shall have this, the new NPV, we minus the base, minus the base, and we divide by the base. We divide by the base, so over the base, that way. And this one we convert it to percentage, convert it to percentage, and you can even have to two decimal, 5.67. So you'll find that our NPV, in this case, the NPV is reducing. Yeah, the NPV will reduce by 5.67. So this was a negative. Yeah, so this one can either be a positive because it is a reduction. This was a negative 50 to negative 47. Negative 50 to negative 47. So it's supposed to be a positive. Supposed to be a positive. Is it really a positive? Yeah, it should be a negative. The way it is a negative, so it will be change of 5.67. Yeah, 5.67 as how sensitive the project is. Then the second one, here I'll copy the original. I'll copy the original one and I'll paste it here, plus our format. So remember this was year 0, and this one will be year 0. That way, this was the initial, and this one. So here we are having 50. Here we are having 15, the residue. So the units. So whatever now will change here is our selling price. Our selling price is what will change. Currently, our selling price was 700. Is what we have currently. So the new selling price. So the new selling price. New selling price will be. So remember, selling price is a revenue. It will have to reduce. It will reduce by 7.5%. So we shall have a selling price of 648. Meaning that what will change now is this. We shall have this multiplied by this. That way, and we shall autofill this. So the only thing that will change here is the selling price only. Only the selling price will change. Only the selling price will change. Only the selling price will change. So only the selling price will change, the rest will remain, the rest will remain, the rest will remain that way. So the rest will remain, so that in this case our NPV now reduces to 47. Our NPV becomes 47. This was 40. This was our NPV under this. Under this is our NPV. It is good to confirm. You can see that it is picking a wrong. The rate is wrong because it has picked a wrong rate. Our rate was 11% here. So this was for the base. For this one, you can see it picked the wrong rate. Here, K47, this was the wrong rate. Here, so I was to lock this rate. I was to lock the rate because the rate was constant. The rate was constant, so I am supposed to lock this. That rate will not change. The rate is constant, and that's why here now you are finding that it is becoming this. Yeah, so percentage change, it has increased by 0.01, and you're finding that is a positive. Yeah, positive. But now percentage change in NPV, so NPV is increasing, but by a very smaller margin of 1% from negative. So it is a decrease. Is a decrease because in this case it's from 50 to this. Yeah, percentage change in NPV. So NPV decreases. Remember now, whenever the NPV percentage decrease in NPV percentage change, so this is a decrease. Maybe specific there, it will decrease by that particular amount. It will decrease by that particular amount. So I'll change this by this one. And you'll find that here again it is increasing more. It is increasing or decreasing more. So percentage change in NPV here. So we shall have this. So I'll open the bracket. This one we minus the base. Remember, we are looking from the base, and we divide by the base. We enter. We change this into percentage. Increase to decimal. Again 0.01. Yeah, almost the same change. Almost the same change. 0.01, 0.015. And this one, if I increase, this one is specifically to 3 decimal, 0.07. So this is a decrease again. A decrease in NPV by that particular value. We copy again the base. Copy the base case, and we shall paste it here. The base case. So I'll paste it here, and in this case now, so this is 0. So here we are having the initial outlay, and this one. So here we are having this, and here we are having the 15 that way. So that what we shall have now under this case, we are done with the units, we are done with the sales. Variable cost. Our variable cost, the variable cost that we had a variable cost of 350. So the new variable cost, new variable cost here. Our new variable cost, now variable cost will increase. This is a cost, it will increase by 7%. Adverse variation. For the cost, adverse is positive. the cost adverse is positive, so it will change to that value. It will change to that value. So this one is supposed to be just a number that way, and here now the variable will change, so it will be the others, remember, they remain constant. We multiply by this that way, and we autofill that, yeah, that way. So that one now becomes our variable. It becomes our variable cost. It becomes our variable cost. So the rest will remain. The rest will remain because already the formulas are intact. The rest will remain, and we'll find that that will be our NPV. That will be our NPV. So in this case, it has captured even the rate. It has captured the rate that way. So percentage change in NPV. Percentage change in NPV shall take this value. You minus the base and you divide by the base, and you enter this one, and so it's supposed to be in percentage. Yeah, almost the same with the other one. 0.07, 0.07, 0.07 will be our percentage change. So that is a variable. So we are remaining with the fixed and the initial. Yeah, fixed and initial only. Fixed and initial. Fixed and initial. So if we paste the rest, so we shall have now to copy our base, copy the base, and I will paste it twice to make it easier. I will paste it here, and I paste it here, the other, that way, so that here shall have the initial and the residue. The initial and the residue, even here, shall have the initial and the residue, that way. So that in this case, what we are dealing with now is the fixed cost, and the fixed cost we had the initial 2.5, so it will increase in this case. The new fixed cost will be this, so multiplied by 1 plus our rate sensitivity. It will vary by that, so it will be 26. So here this will change to this value, and you autofill that. So I will lock this, and I'll autofill that way. So this one is still the 15 that we have there, that way, and the initial is still 50. So this one I will have to change this and to reduce that. So variable, I am done with variable. So this one, so the fixed, so this one will be our new NPV. Our new NPV, already we have changed that. So the percentage change in NPV. For this one, the NPV, I can highlight it using a different shade. Even this one, can use that. So percentage change, we shall take this and we minus the base, and we divide by the base. This one, so we'll find that. So these are decreased. All these are decreased. the NPV will decrease by that value. It will decrease by that value. So it is decreasing, towards that end. Then for this one now is for, we have put the wrong, is the initial outlay and the residue. That way the residue is not changing, but the initial now will change. The initial outlay will change. So the initial was 50, this was 50, but the new IO, new initial outlay, it will increase. It will increase by 7.5. It will increase by 7.5%. Yeah, to that value. So here we shall have this as our initial. We'll find that the NPV will now increase. Will decrease to 54. Yeah, NPV will decrease to that particular value. That way. And that is how. So percentage change in NPV. So here, so we shall have this, and we minus the base, and we divide by the base, and we convert this into percentage. Yeah, you can find that this is the most sensitive. The IO, the initial in this case, is more sensitive. Just a smaller change in that is bringing a very big change in NPV. 7 point followed by 1 point. The rest were insignificant, but just smaller percentages. As compared to this. So that's how. The only thing, the marks that they gave was just less than the expected input that was supposed to be done. So that's how that part for part B was supposed to be done on all projects except the residue and the project life. So part C, prepare an appropriate chart to indicate different NPV for each scenario in B above. So the NPV for each scenario. So we just need a chart for doing the comparison. Chart for doing this comparison. So remember our variables. Our variable, we shall have the units. So here we shall have variables and NPV. Variable and NPV. So our variable, we have the units. Then the selling price. Then variable cost. Variable cost. Fixed cost. And the initial cost. So those are the variable. So prepare an appropriate chart to indicate the different NPVs. So under where we in each, yeah, so this is in scenario B. So under the units, when we are using the units, we started with the units at this particular NPV. Selling price at this NPV. Variable cost at this NPV. Fixed cost at this NPV, and the initial outlay at this NPV. For the initial, you can have a different shade. Yeah, that way. So those are the NPVs that we are having. So appropriate chart to indicate this. So we shall insert the recommended recommended chart, and you can just decide to use this for comparison purpose. So for the purpose of comparison, that will be our chart for the NPVs. The chart for the NPVs. So remember, in this case they are inverted because they are negative, and you can now be able to see which one is more sensitive than the other. So that is how that particular question, or that part for the chart, was supposed to be presented. And the last one, the last part of this question, part D, identify the input variability where the project still remains viable. So the input variability where the project still remains viable, So if the project is to remain viable, so we need to find the input variability. So how will the inputs change so that the project remains viable? Remember, under these, already the project was not viable. The input variability where the project still remains viable. In our case, the project from the word go was not viable because it had a negative NPV, so it was not viable. But in case it was supposed to be viable, remember, for the viability, the project has to get an NPV of 0, at least 0. Project has to have an NPV of 0 so that it will be viable. And for it to be 0, then the other factors have to change. The other factors have to change so that it becomes positive. And remember, now we had a negative what? A negative 50. So for the last part D, where we are told to identify the inputs variability of the project remains viable. Remember, under all situation, here you can paste and say that under the base case, it was a negative base case. We had this negative, and all adverse changes make NPV worse. So the project is not viable under current assumption. Under any current assumption, we can say that the project is not viable. Because all of them, so we needed at least to have a positive. We needed to have at least a positive value, but because we don't have any positive, then the project is not viable under all the assumptions. Under the current assumption, the project is not viable. So that's how the question was supposed to be done. So it had a lot of workings, especially for the sensitivity analysis. Kindly consider subscribing if you are yet to subscribe to this particular channel. So thank you.